Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at IronHack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast, and we are today with Will. But Will, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, Rob.
Let's do this because Will has been over the past 12 years working with 7 different billion-dollar banking and securities companies. And during that time, he witnessed the longtime industry incumbents lose market share to FinTech unicorns as products democratized access to financial markets and minted millions of new investors overnight. And he felt that the industry had prioritized access over education and in the process failed to appropriately equip those new investors with the knowledge to succeed. And that's why he has been building Stack to teach the youngest generation of foundational finance principles so that they could build habits that last, of course, a lifetime. Leveraging things that go from Web3, Will, through Stack, wants to make learning about finance fun, social, and rewarding. So you can see there that, it's all about learning. It's all about making learning fun as well, but specifically about learning finance, which is probably not the first thing people think of when learning about something fun. But Will, is there anything we're missing when doing this intro?
No, that's it. I mean, I spent my whole career in securities, and I think the theme is really just how do you get more people involved in the finance industry by making it more approachable? And I think there's, a ton of symbiosis about, I know a lot of what you care about, Rob, with gamification and with making things digestible and easy to learn, and almost in a way that you don't realize, you're being educated in the first place. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in and talk about it more.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here to talk about as well. So Will, we sort of start with a very simple question, and it's all about what are you doing these days? If we followed you around for a day or a week, what would that look like? What would that feel like? What's sort of being Will feel like nowadays?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so I founded Stack a little over a year ago now. Full-time founder. It's been, it's been the roller coaster of, the founder journey, I think, in a lot of ways, where you get to wear every hat in the business. You get to talk to TikTok influencers one day. You're, negotiating legal contracts. You're, recruiting for new employees. You're making wireframes for your product. You're doing pricing investigation against competitors. I mean, you really just do the full gamut. And I think that's the really rewarding thing about founders. I always say, any job, you should either be getting paid a lot of money or be given a lot of knowledge. And I think I learned so much every day as a founder. I think it's a really rewarding way to spend time. Building Stack, I think the biggest thing that we're really focusing on right now is getting our app live, which will come out next month. And we will be the first authorized platform for under 18-year-olds in crypto. And so that's exciting in itself. We will be able to have basically parents and teenagers who co-own an account together on our platform, have entirely different user experiences. And it's a way for kids to get involved in digital assets that a lot of them are very, very curious about, and do it in a very low stakes environment, a very approachable, hopefully, environment that is really built natively for them. And for them to make mistakes, but make mistakes with $10 and to learn and to be able to do a lot of really cool things. So we're excited.
Do real mistakes with real money, but, lowering the stakes. That's a good way to see it as well.
Exactly.
So, Will, after sort of getting to know you better, we always like to start strong, right? So understanding what could be one of the situations, and as a founder, I'm sure you faced this more than once, but perhaps what would you call one of your favorite fail moments or first attempts in learning, especially when it comes to engaging people, using gamification, games-based learning, whatever you want to go for in that sense?
Yeah. Well, as a founder, you fail every day. I always say, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the old Nickelodeon show. It was called Double Dare 3000, and there's a part of that show at the very end of it where you have to run through an obstacle course, and you are diving into slime pits, and you're sort of weaving throughout the obstacle course to grab a bunch of flags. I think founding a company is like that. You're just trying to figure everything out as quickly as possible. There just is no playbook, and you just need to dive head first and go for it. When it comes to gamification and like, the fails that come to mind, the biggest one is actually simplicity. I think what we've realized, the more product testing that we do and the more users we get engaged with our product, is really that we've kind of overcomplicated some things. And the best forms of gamification are often actually very, very simple. And because of how simple they are, they're easy to understand. They're very intuitive in how they function. And I'll even give some examples. We've been sort of debating how we make this finance world gamified. And we do so in a way that we really carry the baton for good investing habits. And so you could think of our platform almost as like the day trading strategy, where we want people to hold their investments long term. We want them to periodically save. We want them to diversify their portfolio. We want them to learn hands-on with real money. And so what we do to do that is we do some awarding. We have challenges that you can basically take every single day, and you can get rewarded in free crypto. And when we were kind of devolving what that looked like in our product and doing a lot of product testing, the feedback that we got immediately was the more complicated it got, the more actually users started to disengage with it. And they didn't totally understand, how all of the different product fragments fit together in one cohesive puzzle. And so what we've done since then is really just boil it down to simplicity, to, what is the main objective and how do we center our gamification strategy around those objectives? And so I think that's kind of the biggest one that we take on the nose, is just breaking it down to the most simple product and the most simple gamification, but that is meaningful, that's fun, that, we're probably honestly never going to be the app that someone is engaging with like a video game, in that they could spend hours and hours on it. But what we do want to do is we do want people to approach their relationship with their finances, much more frequently than they do right now. And, I can even say as an investor, I use some of my apps once a month, and that's just because you're checking your balances and probably not trading. And so if you can instead get people to approach their portfolios a little bit more frequently by adding some gamification features, but also being honest and simple about that in a way that you're probably going to grab their attention for 2 minutes a day, that's a win for us. And I think we're pretty excited about, the proposition of that.
Is there, I love the fact that your conclusion is arriving to that simplicity, because it's something that we've discussed multiple times on the podcast for sure. But is there maybe a moment in particular that you remember, like, oh yeah, we were, going to do this, and, the users either pushed back or didn't get the whole thing because, it wasn't simple enough? Is there a time that you remember where this sort of became super patent in your head, perhaps?
Yeah. So we were noodling with a few things. I mean, obviously diving into Web3, the couple things that I think about are an award system where you are playing and earning, and then you're also getting to experience what I'll call very lightly in quotations, the metaverse. And the metaverse, I think, is a little bit of an ambiguous term these days, because that can mean, quite simply being on Zoom with somebody. And then it can also mean having a, virtual reality headset on and truly, being in a totally virtual world. And so I think, when we were trying to accomplish all of those things, we had an avatar in the app. We had all of these awards that were attached to a leveling system. And we also had these challenges that you were getting rewarded on. And because there were so many different things happening at once, the cohesion of all those elements didn't really hit. And so what we decided to do was to sort of unwind some of that and really say, okay, what is the number one and two behaviors that we want to set in, our gamification strategy? And that was really simple. It was, we want people to learn these three fundamental lessons about investing. And it's that you should hold long term, that you should save every once in a while, and that you should diversify your portfolio. And so if we could have, that built in a way that awards you at very different tiers, so you get an award very quickly, right when you do something like don't sell an investment for a week or add your first deposit to the account, whatever it is. And then it evolves into, some more complicated things. I think going on that user journey was really important and really putting us in a customer's shoes. Because it's so hard, right? You make a product and the product so well that when you add things on top of it, they don't feel complicated to you, but they really do become complicated to somebody that's just sort of onboarding. And so you have to control your vision for your product, and you have to be really stringent on anything that you add and how it, might have an effect on some of the core features, and really maybe even like take it on the nose as day one and just say, we're going to be very core to our product offering.
That makes a lot of sense, and it goes all the way back to what you started with, and it's all about simplicity and simplifying. Sometimes you start thinking, and I'm doing workshops right now, several of them, and one of the things that you typically get is, oh yeah, I want this whole thing, and it has this, and it has that, and they're over here, and they're over there. Well, sometimes it's about, what is that the thing, or the two, or maybe three things that you want to make sure the user, player takes away. That if they leave with that, you'll be satisfied. And you focus on that, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that in the future you cannot add more things, that the user maybe will be able to play with some other features, some other stuff. But right now, what is that one thing that will make the app a success? What is that one thing that will make sure that the user is, in your case, better in finance, that in other cases is better at some whatever skill you're going for? That is something you want to make sure you focus on very, very quick, very, very deeply as well, because that is what is going to make a huge difference for your user. That one, maybe two things that you put up there, and that's where you're going to say, once we're able to get them to do these things, then we can talk about other stuff later. After that, first we got to get that right, and it's not easy. I mean, I'm not saying it's an easy task.
No, it's not. I mean, it's I think it also, is really ingrained in taking a stance on things too. And you have to have an opinion and infuse your opinion into your product. And some people, and I think I even made this mistake kind of early on in building our product as well, you want to appeal to a lot of people. And so you get scared of taking stances that people might not agree with. But the reality is that you're never going to get 100% buy-in on literally pretty much anything that you do. And so if you can take stances and you can have an opinion and you can infuse that into your product and you can say, I want to create these three behaviors because I really believe in them, then you're naturally going to get an audience that really understands what your brand is about, what your product is about, and they're going to gravitate to it. And you can certainly, evolve that over time. But I do think that if you don't take a stance and you try to appeal to too many people at one time, you just don't resonate with people in the same way.
Absolutely. And that's something that is, again, as you were saying, it's really hard to do. Really hard to do because we're thinking, we're losing this opportunity, or, I know that I can also appeal to these people and I'm sure that they will also like this or that. And, it's hard to run away from that. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So, engagers, take that advice. Make sure you at least think about it, right? And realize how valuable it can be for your journey when you say, well, these are the things that we are, and these are the things that we're not. These are the people we're designing for, and the rest of the people, maybe some of them will come, maybe some of them won't, but it doesn't matter. We need to focus. We need to see who this is for, who we're designing for. We need to design for someone as opposed to design for no one. It's not for everyone. It's never for everyone. And if you were saying, I'm trying to remember the exact words that you were saying, that if you try to appeal for everyone, etc., if you try to please everyone, and you realize you're pleasing everyone, you're probably not being specific enough. If you say,
gosh.
oh yeah, I'm all in for world peace. Oh yeah, nobody's going to say no to world peace. But how are you going to implement it, right? What does that mean? And there's where, the devil is in the details, and there's where you'll get some disagreements, and they are safe, sound, and they're okay. It's okay to get those disagreements, because some people don't think the same way you do, basically. And that's okay.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, I've heard, I'm sure people have heard this anecdote before, but it's the idea of build for the 100 people that would pay for your product at a very premium price tonight if it was available. And I think it's so true. I mean, you just, get really, really ingrained to a very specific customer segment and zeitgeist as a brand that you want to represent. And then you can kind of build out from that.
It's possible to build out from that. It's actually easier to build out from that if you start by having a huge, well, not huge, but hugely engaged audience, a hugely engaged group of people who are going to be rooting for you. That is what you want to make sure that you get. These people are there and they want to see and share that success with you. They want you to succeed because they realize how important it is for them and how much it engages them and how much they are into your solution. And this, we're going into entrepreneurship here, Engagers, and that's okay because many of you might be getting into that, down that route as well, which is amazing. It's fantastic. It's exciting. But also think about it as a designer. When you're designing your gamification solutions, who are you designing for, right?
Yeah.
So, taking a spin on this, because it's been a fantastic part of the segment of the conversation. I think plenty of lessons to take away, to take home. However, Will, I know you've been building the app, and I'm sure you've had plenty of success moments and exciting moments as well. So can you talk us through one of those moments where, something went really, really right in the first or the nth iteration? It doesn't matter. We want to be there with you. We want to maybe find one or two key success factors there. We want to live that experience with Will.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest success was when we really changed how we started engagement with users in our product. And I think, some people do a terrific job of this, of just making it inherently intuitive and a way that users can, as a day one customer, very easily navigate, the game or the app or whatever it is. I think what we actually decided to start with that was really successful, we got a lot of really good feedback on, was actually starting by sort of decoding what users thought they knew about our subject matter right when they got on the app. And so, not really pushing them into a certain direction from day one, not putting a lot of things in their face and saying, you should be doing this or that, and more asking the question, well, what do you think is the right thing to do? And I think that you can build product features that do that across really any product. And you can, it's almost like a really smart tutorial, if you will, that tests a user and tests what they think they know and how they, want to navigate that subject matter. And so once we implemented that on the app, and what it looked like for us was we literally, would have users take challenges that, asked them, what they thought good strategies were, for instance, and they would answer questions. And the inherent ability of really just guiding somebody to the right answer rather than telling it to them, especially with our audience, which is certainly a younger segment, I think was really helpful because they still felt like an individual. They didn't feel like they were being infantilized at all. And so I think there's a really powerful story there of just creating an engaging product, not by telling somebody to do something, but by guiding them along a behavior with their preconceived notions of, what would they think.
Basically, you were listening to them. You're giving them a voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Sort of a best practice there, you could say, is almost just even as simple as it sounds, is, giving your player that voice to say, well, actually, I think this is the right answer. Even just that
it totally
can make a
is.
difference, huge difference, especially in these sort of democratizing times that we're living as well, where, it's also important to hear that voice of your customer for sure.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of great games out there that I think let their customers, even really build the game experience themselves, which we just don't have the technical ability to do right now. But I do think that that's something that we plan to lean into is the more that you can create an environment that's customizable to, your consumer, and that they can decide where they want to go with things and really have optionality. I think that is so significant in some of the offerings. And so for right now, we're really almost data collecting and like you said, listening. And then we'll slowly sort of devolve that into some of those broader concepts as well.
Fantastic. So when you're thinking of building a piece of lesson or a piece of learning for your users, and you're thinking of using gamification perhaps, or you're thinking of engaging them in this way, do you follow some form of a process? Do you have some series of steps? Like if you were to implement something new, how would you do it? What would that look like basically?
Yeah. The way that we educate right now, again, I mean, we try to make our content as digestible and also as native to our users as possible. So you get a challenge every single day in our app, and it sort of is like set to a timer. So it releases once every 24 hours. And it's kept to, especially a younger user that is not engaging for a long time, it's kept to really like a quick 5-minute quiz, essentially. And that quiz is paired with video content. And when you go through the quiz, you can basically take what we call the cheat code, which are these 30-second to 60-second videos that explain a concept in a really digestible way. It almost looks a little bit more like TikTok content than anything else. And you go through it and you answer, and then you get rewarded. And the more you do that, but the more you create those behaviors, then you also earn these bigger awards. And so there's a social part of the platform, that sort of pairs all of the users together, and they can see which each other has, what awards and, how long they've been using the app, all that kind of stuff. And so when we introduce new features and we think about how to make that content more digestible, more meaningful for our user, I think we really start from a point of, again, just listening. And so when we introduce a new product concept, and I think the one that we think about a lot is avatars, for instance, and some way to also teach a user about this metaverse world and what it's all about and get them involved in a very low stakes way. I think we think about what is the most effective and yet digestible way to do that. And so we're introducing some award features that I think will graduate into a potential avatar and a character that gets leveled and, and leans into gamification even more. But it starts from a very core offering of just like getting awards. And what that will do is it'll give us a lot of really good data and context on what are people engaging with most, what awards are they earning the most, what do they care about? And once we have that story, we can then use that story to more intelligently, add on top of it. I think you build more complex things into the things that people are using the most and that they're leaning into the most, because, that's obviously where their interests are.
Sounds great. Thank you for that very quick run through of the way that you create these lessons, these learnings through your app, through your experience.
Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement.
And Will, what would you say in your experience and what you've done to this date, what would you say is perhaps something that you would call a best practice? Something that you would say, well, if you're thinking of gamification and learning, in our case it's finance, but perhaps in that or any other territory, what would you say is something that, you should do this thing because it's going to make your project at least, marginally or a little bit better than it would be without it?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the community that you're trying to create and being really true to that community. And so, I'll be honest. I think that there's a part of gamification that actually gets a little bit of a bad reputation, and that is from, some platforms that have chosen to gamify and, maybe choose some, get away from the values of their brand and their company a little bit. And that violates the community that they've built. And, inherently, I think that can obviously be a very complicated situation where, you now have a product that has some offerings in it that the community doesn't resonate with. And so I think being true to that community, and it doesn't mean that you can't have gamification features that, have to always be vanilla or, the best practice. But I do think that you need to have context on your community and what they're asking for. And so for us, it's like we actually have a Discord channel where we're always listening to individuals and asking for product feedback And we actually have a portal that some users leave just videos of them going through our product. And what's so interesting about those videos is that it's not feedback directly to me or somebody else in our team, but you get a chance to read their facial expressions, and you get a chance to look at how they're interacting, what they're clicking on, what they look like in it, whether there's a clear emotion that's coming out while they're using something. And I think that type of community-driven data, paired with, of course, creating a conversational tool like a Discord channel or Slack channel or something else where people can leave candid feedback, I think those are gold, right? Those are the things that help you build a product that is true to that community.
So actually gathering that feedback from your community, I guess.
Yeah, and gathering it in a way that it's not biased, right? I mean, it's so hard to collect unbiased data these days. And, you can put ads out in Facebook and in Google for your game or your product. And because of the way that those platforms are run, it's easy to draw some lessons from that actually might not be true to the thing that you're trying to create. And so I think some people sell out for engagement sometimes, honestly. And there's a very, very careful story there that you think you need to play with. And that's, how are you getting data? Are you getting data from a lot of different sources and not just people using the app and not just, a review portal where people can leave things, but really a lot of different sources that are as unbiased as possible so that you can effectively iterate on whatever your product is.
There you go. So a way of gathering authentic feedback. And of course, if you want to follow up that question with Will, make sure you listen to the end and hear where we can find out more about Will and his app. Will, talking about recommendations, you just gave a fantastic one. What would you say is somebody that comes to your mind? Perhaps you were listening to the questions and you say, oh, I know this person, or I think this person would be super interesting for me to listen to answering these questions in a future interview, perhaps in Professor Game.
Oh my gosh, there's so many people that are extremely well informed on this world. If you're thinking about building something, and I know this community is a lot of people that are tinkering in game design and building gamified products in some way, I think that anybody that you see with design experience and as a gamer at heart, we have an amazing advisor. Her name is Janie Persini, and she is the VP of Growth at Dapper Labs, which has the NBA Top Shot platform, and it has a few of the other NFTs associated with the NFL and the UFC. And she's been, I think, a really interesting sort of barometer for gamification. She worked at EA, Electronic Arts, for a long time, and she worked at Reddit for a while. And so she knows this sort of gamified community really well and what they care about. And her whole job is to grow, the user base of their products. And so I think she's been a really amazing barometer for the voice of the community that she's been building. And so I think anybody that has sort of a growth title or somebody that, is responsible for holding that community together cohesively and growing that community over time has a really unique perspective. That's probably really different than a design perspective, and you can design a game really effectively. And sometimes once you design that community, in your app, there is some limitations, right? Because there's certain people that there's a collective group of people that probably care very specifically about a certain product feature, for instance. And you could be totally blind to that product feature if you're not sending these signals out into the world and saying, oh, would you guys enjoy this? Do you like that? And so I think the pairing of this design perspective with a growth and a marketing hat, it's nice to think that every product can be product-led growth these days. But I actually think that there's a really important piece of marketing that really is the voice of potential customers. That's the voice of these other bigger markets that you can get involved in and these additional product offerings that you can, kind of, again, be a little bit blind to at times. So I think talking to somebody with that background that's in this gamified world is always a really interesting one.
Sounds super interesting. Hopefully we'll get somebody in that direction. And if you think of somebody in the future, you can feel free to send us an email as well. Always happy to continue receiving those recommendations. And talking about those recommendations, I'm sure at some point, well, if you're a reader or a little bit of a reader, at some point you read a book and say, oh, this book, it's working for me. It gave me inspiration. Or looking back, you say, oh, I realized that this thing I did came from this place that I read. So is there a book that you would recommend to the engagers?
Yeah, well, I'm going to plug a book that doesn't necessarily have, something to do with design necessarily, but I do think it has a ton of knowledge just about life experiences and how it guides whatever you're doing in your career, whether that's designing a product or starting a game company or, working for a game company in a lot of different ways. And that's a book that's called The Defining Decade. Some might be pretty familiar with it. And it's a book that each chapter is a different person's story. And they're in like a psychologist's office and they're talking about a problem that they're having in deciding what's next in their career. And they have all sorts of different backgrounds. Some are highly educated and some are, left high school early and really everything in between. And they are working in a million different types of fields and their stories are incredibly powerful. And I think in that book, there is enough flavor that you're going to find yourself resonating with a specific chapter. I know I did. And it helps, I think, really motivate you to design the next 5 to 10 years of your career in a really effective way. And so, for all the designers out there, people that are sort of working in this really exciting industry of gaming, I think, having an idea and a design for what you're going to ask of yourself and your career and your ambitions is hugely important to know where you're going.
Very good advice. So we'll keep that in mind when having future lists of reading. Thank you for that recommendation, Will. And we've talked about, that recommendation of, a best practice. You mentioned somebody, the profile you would like to listen to in a future interview in Professor Game, a book. How about you? What would you say is your superpower? That thing, at least, that you do better than most other people?
I think I'm actually a really good listener in a lot of ways. I think that part of growing a company becomes a lot about being able to have the strategy and understand where a product is going, but then also how to execute that strategy yourself. And there's so few people that, especially when you're a first-time founder, it's really hard to envision that end to end. You could think about how do you legally form an entity? And you could think about how do I wireframe my product? And you could think about how do I write the code for that product? How do I price it? Am I going to get it out there so that people know the brand and market it? There's so many different things to solve when you're an operator. When you get a chance to both be the strategy visionary, but also execute that strategy, I think you do learn a lot of lessons about yourself. And so I think for me, the biggest lesson has been just being a good listener, asking a lot of questions, being very user-centric, and finding ways to get product feedback, even when your product isn't out there. And I know there's a lot of designers out there that could be pre-product and are trying to push a product to go live. That is a really interesting stage because you can collect data on people that are willing to test a demo or even just talk about a product without even seeing it. And I think you find in those people not only really early users, but you find people that genuinely care about the problem that you're trying to solve. And they'll give you so much amazing feedback that a lot of it shocks me every time I hear it. And I get something new from every single interview. And so I would just encourage others to be really good listeners and to always be asking those questions.
So a superpower along with a very good recommendation, for user research, that's definitely the main thing you got to have is a good ear. And I don't mean good audition. I mean good listening, being attentive to what the other people are actually saying. What does that mean? What does that look like? Why are they saying this? Taking a look sort of into the deeper end of things in a way where it's not just what you want to hear, which is something that happens pretty often as well. You're hearing what you want to hear in many ways. It's also about, really putting your ear there and saying, what is this actually about? What is this person trying to tell me? How can I get the best information out of that to improve my product and to give them something that they will like? That is super important. You're creating for your users. You're not creating just for yourself. So keep that in mind, engagers, and hopefully you will be able to get a lot further making sure that you create for them and not just for yourself. Listen up, just like Will does. It's a very, very significant, very useful superpower as well, Will. And, we always like to make this question that at least we think is very, very important, that helps a lot to understand our audience, also our guests. But some people find it very, very difficult because it's all about understanding what is your favorite game.
Oh my gosh. I think my favorite game, there's a game. Well, I'll say my most recent favorite game because I have a lot of favorite games over the years. I mean, in the early days, when I was like a teenager and even like young college student, I loved the game Age of Empires. That was, was a PC
awesome
game.
One.
That was so fun. Yeah. I think the strategy games in general are always the ones that I gravitate to. But the most recent one that I've taken a look into, it's not necessarily a recent game, but I've recently gotten into it. It's called Off-World Trading Company, and that's another strategy game. It's a little bit more business oriented. You're building, like a colony on an alien planet, and there's almost like a stock market. So very similar to some of the finance concepts that we're doing at Stack, but there's a stock market element to it where, you compete with these computers or real people that are trying to push certain products and goods, and they're selling them and they're buying them, and the prices are adjusting on the open market against each other, and you're really trying to out execute. And so I think there's some lessons there of just really understanding how these different investing markets work. And I think Off-World Trading Company did a really fascinating job of illustrating those concepts in a strategy game.
Hadn't heard of it. It sounds pretty interesting as well. When you were mentioning Age of Empires, and given I also played quite a bit of Age of Empires myself back in the day. Age of Empires too, by the way.
Yeah.
That was the one, I guess. But now I'm playing on my mobile phone. I'm playing Clash of Clans, which kind of has a little bit of Age of Empires as well. A lot of strategy involved.
Definitely.
It has also a social element, which I'm enjoying quite a bit of, belonging to a clan and, interacting with all these people that you probably don't know from before. I still haven't met any of them in real life. So, pretty interesting one for sure.
I love that.
So, Will, thanks very much for coming here and sharing your experience, your knowledge, your viewpoint as well. Before we take off, is there any sort of final words you want to say to the engagers? And then, of course, let us know where we can find out more about your app, when it's launching. Maybe when this comes live, the app is already launched. So where can we find about it? Where can we find more about you, your work, the things that you're doing in general?
Yeah, well, my number one message to this gaming community out there is that you're the absolute best and expert at knowing this world because you're a user yourself. And you can get involved at any level with so many companies and what they're trying to build by being a part of their community. And there are so many cool new games out there. There are so many cool mobile applications that are gamifying things. And I really think it comes down to just trying things and diving in the deep end and, seeing different user experiences, because they'll make you a better designer. They'll make you a better product builder and product manager and all of those things. And so I think that's probably the number one lesson I would say is just try a lot of things. I can tell you I have way more apps than I should on my phone. And I'm always trying a lot of new things to see what product features resonate with me. Because again, you can do your own user testing a lot of the time too. And you shouldn't only listen to yourself, be a good listener to everybody else. But you also are going to have an opinion about things, and you should infuse that opinion, like I said, in everything that you build. More on Stack. Yeah, you can find us at trystack.io. That's trystack.io. You can join our product waitlist in there, and the waitlist group is getting the first 3 months of the platform for free, just to see, how they engage with the app and if they like it. And you can sign up for that as well. And we are going to be live next month. So yeah, in the very near future, you'll be able to see our app on the App Store and download it, check it out. I'd highly encourage users to get involved. If you have any feedback, right on the main page of the website is my email, and you can always reach out and tell me what you think about it. I'd love to, do product interviews with anybody that wants to do it. We're always looking for feedback and always looking to get better. And I appreciate everyone's interest.
Very, very interesting. Cool stuff as well. And when you say next month, what month is that, Will?
That's so at the end of April, our app will go live.
All right. So engagers, look forward to that. If it's forward, look into it if it's already live as well. Very exciting things could be going on in the financial education market with the launch of this app. However, Will, after thanking you once again for all the things that you've given in this episode, I must say that it's also time for us to say that it's game over.
Engagers, it is fantastic to have you around, and this podcast makes sense thanks to you. So let's go ahead and connect. How about we use Twitter? There you can write to me about many things, like questions you have, anything help you need, just to keep updated as well. If you like anybody as a guest or suggest a guest, be happy to do that there as well. You can find my Twitter account on professorgame.com/Twitter. And I'm always sharing content about the podcast, about gamification, about education. And before you go ahead and click continue, remember to follow or subscribe for free using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.